Greetings. I'm here to tell you a Philippine story called Sultan Bayabas and the Beggar Boy. And I'm getting to tell you this in front of this beautiful display of some Philippine jewelry. There was once a sultan named Bayabas who ruled the kingdom of Sulu, which was at the southernmost tip of the Philippines. Sultan Bayabas was not a kind man. He was not a good sultan. He was cruel. He had his people in poverty because all the food that the farmers would grow had to be delivered to his palace. Very little was left for the farmers. And if anyone complained about his horrendous taxes or his laws, they were killed. So people didn't say very much to the Sultan, but they did whisper behind his back, and they made fun of him because sultans at this time and this place in the world wore these gorgeous turbans on their head, but not Sultan Bayabas. He wanted gold, and he wore a golden crown on his head. And he wore that crown all the time. He wore that crown when he ate. He wore that crown when he took his bath. He wore that crown when he strutted around his palace. Everyone thought he looked very silly, but of course they'd never say anything. He was also very fat because all he did was eat. And one day, when he was sitting at a long table piled high with food, a long table, but only he was sitting at it. He was sitting there with his guards and retainers all around him, making sure that no one else got into the room. And he was sitting there, feeding his face, eating food after food, when all of a sudden, mysteriously, magically, there was a young beggar boy right next to him. "Oh, please, Your Highness, Royal Sultan, could you give me something to eat? I have no place to live and I have not eaten for 3 days.
What? How did you get in here? What? You'll spoil my appetite. If you're hungry, go ask a servant of mine to feed you."
"Oh, Royal Sultan, I tried that and no one would feed me because they said they were too afraid of you."
Oh, be gone.
And he started kicking the young boy. But as he was kicking, it just made the boy more desperate. And he grabbed the Sultan's leg, squeezing him, pleading about the food. And the Sultan just kicked harder and harder until his golden crown fell with a crash. Oh, the Sultan was furious. He picked up the bowl of boiling hot chicken soup and poured it on the boy's head. Everyone in the room was horrified, but the boy somehow, magically, just disappeared into thin air. The Sultan tried to stand, so fat, but instead he fell with a mighty crash to the floor. His retainers came to try and help him stand up, but they discovered that he was dead. And no one was sorry. There was no mourning for him, not among his attendants or his guards or his servants or his army or any of the people in the kingdom. And they had to bury him in a small little corner of the garden without any ceremony, no marker, just a grave there with a pile of dirt on it. And a new sultan took over who was kind and helped his people, and the kingdom began to get prosperous again. One day, a servant was walking through the garden and went by that grave, and he noticed that a small tree was growing right out of the center of that grave. And on that tree, there were some fruit. And the servant picked several of them. He thought it was quite interesting. He knew it was Sultan Baras's grave, and he noticed that on the top of it, it looked like a little crown. He took it in to the royal cook, showed it to her. Oh, it's so hard, I can't make anything out of this. Took her cleaver, cracked it open, dozens of little black seeds. And they're too hard to bite. Why, this is as hard as Barabbas's heart. And they were going to just leave the fruits on the tree. But she then took a little bite out of the flesh. Ooh, it's so sour. It's as sour as Sultan Barabbas's face. So they left the fruits on the tree. But several weeks later, some children went by there, and they noticed that those green fruits had turned a beautiful yellow. And they smelled tangy sweet. They tasted marvelous. They brought them all in, and everybody ate them, and it still has its little crown on it. And this fruit was named after Sultan Barabbas. And the name has changed over the years and centuries. Bayabas. Today, we call them guava. And when you see a guava, look for the little crown.